Hey, kia ora, good day, Shemai. Welcome back to the latest episode of the Be Better podcast. Before I get stuck into this episode, I have to remember to give a couple of shout outs. One, I'll give a shout out to Nick from Etico for my new merch. If you're watching the video of this, I've just got my new Etico Grow Good branded t-shirts, fair trade, B Corp certified. Go, Nick. Love your work. And also shout out to former colleague of mine, Dave Crosby, who is a listener to the podcast. Dave and I worked together. I don't know, feels like probably like 20 years ago now. And we chat on WhatsApp, and he said, "Oh, I loved your last episode of the podcast." And so I said, I'll give him a shout out. And apparently, his son will think he is the most famous person in the world for having a shout out on a podcast. So hopefully, that has worked for you, Dave. Without further ado, let's get into this latest episode because I am super excited for this episode. People that know me well will know that there's two things that I love a lot in the world, other than my family, obviously, and that is B Corp and skiing. And so today I have got the awesome Leo from Western Skis, and we're going to just be talking all things B Corp and skiing. So, Leo, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Technically, it's Weston Backcountry.
Sorry,
We do
Western Backcountry.
skis and snowboard. No,
Ah,
honestly, it's an honor to actually be considered Weston skis because that's a category we jumped into probably like 4 years ago. And whenever people refer to us like as only knowing our skis, that's like a win in our book. So,
well, I've just been. Have you seen any of the hot dog hands videos on YouTube with that
oh,
freestyle
you know
skiing?
it,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know it. No.
Hey, yeah, yeah. You single planker, get off the get off. I'm very much a pro skier, less so convinced on snowboarding. But we'll leave
Very good.
those conversations for a
I
separate
got
podcast.
That was very, very awesome to have you do that Boston accent. So
Mate, I did. I went to New York once, and yeah, we were out at like some stupid time in the morning, and we were walking past all the hotels on this one street, asking the guys to tell us to get the hell out of there in their best New York accent or Boston accent, and they loved it. Yeah.
it's great, wonderful.
So for people who don't know Leo and don't know Western Backcountry skis, just give us a quick intro. Like, yeah, who are you and what's Western Backcountry all about?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, my name is Leo Tsuo. I am, from Golden, Colorado. It's right in the foothills of the Rockies and just outside of Denver. And it's where I grew up. So, I really grew up in the outdoors. I was practically feral with a bike. And, that's what I know, in Boy Scouts from a really young age. And, my parents were really big and get me into the outdoors. I had a career in renewable energies before this. I went to school in CU Boulder, which for people who know Boulder, it's a very it's its own beast, if you will. It's almost so far left. It's almost a foul ball. But it's kind of known as like just being really, really progressive in a lot of their city policies, and it kind of shows a little bit in the school itself too. And honestly, that's where I got really introduced to the concept of like really entrepreneurship, corporate social responsibility, the purpose-driven, values-driven companies, and kind of said to myself, that's what I want to be a part of. The first company, I actually started out my career in working for an incubator and doing some business plan writing and essentially taking like inventors, scientists, name, those type of people. They're take an idea and put it into something that can be put in front of investors. And so worked with my uncle, found out I was doing this, and he had a business idea in the renewable space, and I did that. Wrote a business plan, did a financial model for him, and I was so intrigued by it. I said, "Hey, once I finish my master's degree, do I have a job?" And he was like, "No." He said, "You got to just quit your master's degree now and come out and do this because this is an opportunity that he is like, I need somebody like on the ground now." So that we did that for 7 or 8 years. It was a really, really challenging time. Very capital intensive. And it was a great experience. And when I got out of that, I said, okay, I'm going to do something a little bit less capital intensive, and just something that was really aligned with what I loved, and that was skiing and boarding. So I was actually on track to become a guide, and wanted to, because I just love sharing my stoke for the powder. When I'd probably be like kind of the antithesis of, have you ever heard the saying "no friends on a powder day"?
Yep.
Yeah, I'm the antithesis of that. Like, I only want friends. I want
Nice.
people to be around to
Bring
high
everyone to
five.
it. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. I would grab people off the chairlift and be like, "Yo, come check out this stash," and like just keep up, and because I love just riding with people. I loved getting people stoked, and that really is just the ethos of of Weston, and just getting out there, getting people stoked on it. And the backcountry piece too, it's a lot of it is just because of the powder that's back there. But when I got into the backcountry, it was a really not the most welcoming space, I guess you could say. It felt, I was that idiot that just saw a bunch of tracks and then just started booting up with a snowboard by myself, no pack, no gear, nothing. And so I got yelled at all the time. It's like, "Oh, you're not prepared. You're this, quit booting in the skin track, this." And it was it just didn't make me want to be in the backcountry. But I'm just that stubborn asshole. Oh, sorry. I'm just
You're a
that
good man.
stubborn, just like, I'm going to keep doing this. I don't care what you think. And as I got into it, even started getting my certifications, getting the gear, it was not I found that it was having to create your own community. Like, you're going to get what you put into it. And that, again, that's really the ethos of Weston. My hobby, my two main hobbies growing up, from kind of like college, high school, college on, was snowboarding, skateboarding, and breaking, and breakdancing, as people call it,
Yeah.
right? And in breaking, it's all about creating your own community. And if you don't do it, it doesn't exist. And it's such a small and niche thing. So that was no question to me. I'm like, all right, like, if I don't like the way that this community is operating in terms of, and I mean the backcountry community, if I don't like the way the backcountry is community in terms of that kind of gatekeeping elitism that was going on, I was like, I'm going to change it. And so that's what I brought to Weston. And luckily for us, it really worked. And I think that, we saw the whole industry as kind of this very aspirational towards these insanely steep lines. And it's just like, and stuff that you'll never, even if you go and pay thousands of dollars to go heli ski in Alaska, you're never going to ride most of the lines you see in the videos, right? Most people's backcountry experience is going to be in just some, small, abandoned resort, or just a small backcountry zone, just to get out and get some exercise. And we're like, okay, like, that's the reality of where we're at. Like, that's our target customer right there. We're not targeting the people that are, paying 20,000, 30, $40,000 to go ride spine lines in Alaska for a month. That's just not our people. So we were like, yeah, more power to you if you're going to take our boards and do it. But we kind of defined our target audience as just the everyday backcountry rider, and it worked for us. And so as of 2019, 2020, we were the number two snowboard or splitboard company, by sales. And as of last year, I want to say 2023, we were named in the top 25 backcountry brands. So it was kind of like it's just like a survey. People have to write
Yeah,
in,
yeah.
like, what brands are in. So we were stoked. That was like our high five moment. So yeah,
Nice.
that's us in a nutshell.
Nice, man. Because you founded it, what, in 2012?
Yeah. Or
So
I didn't found it. It was actually another gentleman named Barry Clark. He's a surfer dude from
yeah.
Seattle. And so our lineup has very surf inspired shapes. Very, a lot of swallowtails. And the way we got into skiing actually is he had two sons. He had one snowboarding son and one skiing. And so, to be fair to each kid, he started making skis. And even though when I was primarily a snowboarder, I actually started skiing. But once we started to have more momentum and had people in our crew that did both, and for a while, our production manager, he was a skier, so we were like, you know what, like we can speak better to the backcountry ski audience than we can like the grungy freestyle thrasher kid that's
Mm.
rocking the hoodie, just park rat kind of
Yeah,
like
yeah. You
style. So we
punks,
said
get off the piste.
it's all love. I used to be
It is.
one of those park rats, but
Yeah.
we just kind of said what it really was is we did a lot of education stuff. Back to the whole community building piece, right? So we were like, hey, what is missing out there? There's this huge gap between getting avalanche certified and taking your actual first steps, literally and figuratively, into the backcountry. And I used to teach this myself. It was called the Splitboard 101. And in the beginning, I'd ask who all here is a splitboarder, and a bunch of people wouldn't raise their hands. And I was like, are a bunch of skiers coming to the Splitboard 101? And so we were already marketing to that audience. And so yeah, it was like, why not launch skis? And so far it's been doing well. But yeah,
Nice.
that was kind of why we did skis and snowboards. And I took over the company in 2016.
Right.
I was working with him initially since 2014,
Yep.
and for a bunch of reasons, he ended up selling the company to me, and
Nice.
then took it from there. So
Awesome. And I think the community thing for me is such a big thing. So I mean, I've literally got a Facebook Messenger group called Cheeky Midweek Ski Team, and so there's a bunch of us who are mainly self-employed. A couple of people who've got, I guess, nice employers who don't mind, and they've got maybe lower levels of commitment, which would mean that they can, take a midweek holiday and go for a ski day. And skiing by yourself is really, it's not much fun. I've every time I go to the mountain by myself, I just have a bad day. I don't ski as well. For me, a big part of the ski scene, I've always thought about, like I suggested it to one of the ski fields in Queenstown last week. Like, you guys should start a podcast and just have someone ride the lift all day and just do 5-minute interviews with people why do you ski? What do you get from skiing? Because there's so much. And we ran a Grow Good B Corp ski retreat last week in Queenstown in New Zealand, and bringing random B Corps together who wouldn't necessarily ordinarily have connected, but through the shared love of the outdoors and skiing, was just really, really cool. And great conversations, great connections made. Oh yeah, actually, I know that person. I can connect you to this person, and like all that kind of stuff, as well as just having some fairly deep philosophical chats on the chairlifts as we're going up, going up and then skiing down. Yeah, it's just it's sad when that lack of community is there, or that. And I guess some people might say skiing is quite an elitist sport in full stop. And sometimes there are financial barriers to skiing, possibly. Yeah, so
absolutely.
I think that's it's just so cool. And I think but I think advice for any business is build community around your products and what you're doing, because there's a massive benefit to that. And there's benefits that you won't even recognize or know in terms of that social community impact of connections and a place for people to come and hang out. And so it's super
And
cool.
the ability of companies to be able to be the facilitator of that, right? It's just like if the common thread, because think about it, the number of participants in any given sport is way more than the companies selling, to that
Mm.
particular segment. And so, it's almost like, why not? It's like encourage that. And it doesn't have to be like full on, like, let's throw a festival and for in every state or whatever. But, it's like, even though we do for our own, we do a front range split fest. And there are split fests throughout the country that we just go to. It was actually kind of an interesting phenomena because the term Splitfest itself, as far as I understood, started in Mount Baker, which is in Washington. And then other places started throwing, insert split fest here. There's a Silverton split fest, which a company out in Silverton, Colorado called Venture had a big part of too. And it's probably like it's a little bit of a slog down to get down there. And so we were kind of like, well, let's do one closer to the Front Range, closer to the Denver area. So called it the Front Range Split Fest. And there's one of our ambassadors throws Bozeman Split Fest. There's all sorts of split fests all over the place, and it's an area where it's like, it's like you said, people getting around a common thing. And there's nothing better than like nature to kind of like ground us and just being outdoors, right? There's always that kind of therapeutic aspect of being out there, and what better way to connect with people? I really do feel like there's, especially in our industry, what better way to have a meeting, than to have a meeting on the lift and really connect and share an experience with somebody, right? Because why not?
Yeah, because for me, it's like, where we ski here in primarily in Mount Hutton in Christchurch, like when it's Bluebird, you have uninterrupted views to the horizon, because basically you're on the edge of the Southern Alps, and so you can see the sea, you can see the Canterbury Plain, like this massive flat area called the Canterbury Plain, just going out in front of you. So just getting into this beautiful blue sky, crisp air, you can see for hundreds of miles. It's good for the soul, it's good for the brain, and like I say, typically there's a group of us, or at least two of us, who are driving out there. And so you've got 90 minutes to get to the ski field where you're having some deeper conversations about life and, who knows what. And then you've got all day to kind of room it. And shout out to my good mate Dietmar, who I mainly ski with. We'll normally have a topic of conversation on the way out. And then, during the day, you're kind of going, do you remember earlier on you mentioned so-and-so? And so, yeah, during the lifts, you'll pick up different threads of conversations. And then he's a famous sort of marketeer. He works for Ogilvy, a big marketing company called Rory Sutherland. And I think the Welsh gene in me is quite strong. So I'm half Welsh, but typically the Welsh will talk to anyone to have just to make a conversation. Like I'll talk to the people in the supermarket, at the checkout, anyone on the chairlift. I'm like, hey, how's it going? How's your day? What skis have you got? Do you like them? Just to have a chat and just to have that connection. I just think it's really important. Apologies to anyone I annoy on the chairlift talking to you. But it's the same with, look, I've got my Augment skis, which aren't a B Corp, but I feel like I will send them an email and say, hey, I'd like you to be a B Corp. And I might know a guy who could help you for a free pair of skis. But the last couple of times I've been skiing and I've seen someone with the same brand of skis, I was like, hey, how's it going? Because there's only one guy who sells them in New Zealand, so shout out to Jace. Well, he's the importer. It's like, so where did you get, when did Jace convince you to buy your skis? It's like, and so when I was in Queenstown last week, I ended up doing 4 or 5 runs with this guy that I've just seen him walking onto the piste, and he's got the same skis as me. It's like, well, you're obviously a good bloke because you've got the same skis as me.
Instant connection, right?
100% instant connection.
That when you mentioned that view, it just reminded me of really what a lot of this nature is. For me personally, it's like my church, right? Like I'm not. That's where I find my connection. That's where I find my purpose. That's where I feel small. That's where I go to get away from it, right? And that to be totally honest, it doesn't discriminate, right? Like anybody can benefit from it. I think it's a pretty well documented thing, like that being in nature is good for your mental health.
100%. And for me as well, just the state of, because there's kind of like 2 types of flow, the state of flow that you can have. So one of them is work based. So for me, like doing these podcasts or running workshops, like that's my kind of state of flow, because I conceivably, like I say, Welsh gene is strong. We could end up talking for like 3 hours and I'd be pretty happy with that. And you'll be like, no, I really need to go and get my workout and see my newborn daughter. But the other type of flow is when you're doing an activity, like typically a sports-based activity where you have to focus so intently. And skiing is really great for that, because you can always be a better skier. There's always something that you can improve and practice. And so even just the fact of having to go down the mountain at a decent pace and look out for obstacles, look out for other people, you're just concentrating on the next turn. Doing that for a day, like I just come back from a day skiing, and yeah, you're tired because it's been a big day, but that clarity that you've had during the day and just not having to think about all the, all the crap of work and family and all the rest of it. It's like, yeah. I mean, I really struggle. I don't understand people who don't like skiing. It's like I don't like you just haven't like seriously like just come and do it. It's like it's so good. My wife amongst them, she's like, oh, it's too cold. It's like, but it's not cold. Once you get going, you're normally
Yeah.
taking layers off.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
There's
totally
always
agree.
a little bit of inertia to overcome, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Um, so it sounds like you've kind of always been fairly purpose driven then, in terms of like your upbringing and this connection to, um, obviously, the stuff that you're doing at uni focused around green business. So yeah, were you? I mean, was yours the type of family that you were, doing volunteering stuff as a kid and helping out in your local community as well, or was it more just that schooling and then university kind of like, hey, this is just how you should do business that got you into it?
huh. You know, that's kind of a good question. I think my I'm trying to think of when I actually came across this, but it's almost like there's the whole concept of voting with your dollars, right? And I almost want to say it was more of a university thing, where I really kind of got, I started reading about, like, there was a book called like Natural Capitalism. There was really got started reading a lot about like social responsibility stuff, and it really, I really like prescribed to that concept that, like, in a sense, like, okay, like an actual, political vote for, insert XYZ law or whatever, that's totally equalized, right? It doesn't matter how much money you have, that your vote is going to be the exact same as, billionaire Jane or Joe Schmo, right? But I do think with voting with your dollars, it's almost like an everyday thing, right? You get to say, what is it that I actually believe in? What is it that I actually want to support? And that's as a consumer, right? And so then when I became more on the business side, it really was looking at it as like, okay, on one side of the coin, we have a very utilitarian product, right? A ski and a board. It goes fast. It rides powder, right? But then on you take that step one more, right? Now you have the brand. And then what is that brand trying to portray? What is that, and I've long believed too that as a company, we have a microphone essentially. If you have a quality product on the utilitarian side and people want to utilize your product, the next level is kind of what is being communicated to them. What does that brand represent? What does wearing that brand mean to them, right? And I think that at that point they become a life of its own. And I think as businesses, you can't avoid this at all. Like if because like unless you're just going to be like I make soda and that's it, like guess what, somebody else is going to come along and be like, I make soda too, and mine probably tastes different. Some people maybe like it better, right? But it's like, how do you become that something that people want to just say, no, I don't just drink soda, I drink a you know this soda, right? And maybe that's a bad example because I'm like, I don't know, I got this at freaking Costco, like it was cheap, right? So maybe that was a bad example. But anyways, like what I think, like when I think of like companies that really are able to be the leaders in their space, like their brands mean something. That when you see that brand, it means something. You mentioned, the ski there. You're just like, okay, there's a very few number of people that are rocking those skis, right? And that if you have these skis, if you're part of this like group that knows, right? And there's a little bit of like a wink nudge whenever you see that, right? And so like, and I think that it's very important for brands to identify exactly what that is. And I don't mean it from like a what's the most trendy thing? What are people wanting to follow? It's like, no, like what is it that's at the core of your business that you want to portray? And that's why I thought it was so important that these were causes that were important, not just to me. It's not like me being like, oh, this is like what Leo thinks is important, but this is what I saw as this is going to help benefit like the community, right? And that's why Weston for us like is not just about like a handful of like people doing awesome things. It's essentially saying this is the entire community. We want to support the entire community. And what is it within that community that's going to help elevate the community? And so for us, like it's kind of this backwards approach, if you will, of like starting with what are the needs of our backcountry community, right? In terms of like, okay, we lack opportunity for, for that community building. Are there enough event spaces? It's not as easy to, it's not like pickup game at basketball where you just, I mean, even though it could be, you can just show up at a trailhead and be like, hey, can I tour with you or whatever? But that takes a lot to even get to that point, right? In terms of making that path to education, making that path to getting gear, so on and so forth, just eliminating and smoothing out that trajectory for people to get into this sport. It's such a new sport, to be totally honest. Like, even if you consider the backcountry skiing side of it, touring and backcountry, and splitboarding, ski touring, splitboarding, they're number 2, number 5 in terms of fastest growing sports. Number 1 is pickleball, of course, who'd have
Yeah,
guessed?
yeah.
Uh,
That was a bolter from nowhere.
yeah, so I mean it's kind of it's kind of an interesting thing. And when, like I said, when you have a brand and you are looking at the world as like, okay, when people consume, they are essentially voting for what they want to see, like, you have a responsibility to provide that for them. And it's worked out for us as a business model in terms of saying, what, being that values driven, being that purpose driven, that's bigger than just the products that you make and sell. It works. And yeah, it really works. But I think it has to come from a place of authenticity. It can't just be like, oh, the backcountry is I can make money in backcountry. Like, I'm going to get into the backcountry space and, throw a lot of money at doing events. And
Because
then,
it's a market opportunity that I can, yeah. I think
exactly. So if it starts like that, but if it's not authentic, it's kind of like, I think people can see through it, right?
100%.
So
100%. I've had a few, I mean, you amongst them. I've had some really awesome guests recently, but a couple that stand out. Lady Helen from Oku. So so for international listeners, the Maori people of New Zealand. She's connected. She's Maori. She's connected to creating like these tinctures and tonics and drinks based on, there's 2 sort of native plants in New Zealand. One's called manuka and one's called tanuka. And so she makes these drinks and tonics and tinctures out of this product. And just she's not only connecting back to some I guess like indigenous medical principles, but she's also doing regenerative native planting to be able to grow the products to put in her products. And it's just like, you cut that company in half, and it bleeds purpose all the way through. And yours is the same. Like, I think the fact that you built or you kind of bought the company but built it around the problems that you had around trying to do something and be involved in the community. It's almost like it's partly like, do you remember the old Remington adverts? Who's got, the guys, I like the company so much I bought it. It's kind of like, the problem was so big, I just thought I'd create the company and build the community around it to solve the problem that I had.
yeah.
And I think a lot of the really cool B Corps that have that depth of authenticity, have that. You can just, you kind of knock on the side, and it's not hollow. It's solid. It's like it goes all the way through, and this is at the core of what we do, and that drives our decision making, and that means we're a better company. Creating better products, creating better outcomes. People support us more. So it's you can 100% sense that, rather than. There are certainly some B Corps out there in the world. I won't name any because I probably can't think of it off the top of my head, but there are certainly some out there that you kind of go, a small change in direction in the market or a change of CEO, and you're probably not going to recertify because you've done this mainly for marketing reasons rather than we're genuinely, authentically building something here that's bigger than just trying to sell as many units as we can. And I think, yeah, people can smell that. And I think that's why, partly one of the reasons why B Corps are doing, typically are outperforming their non-B Corps peers or competitors. So,
yeah, yeah.
So how did you? Well, I guess, yeah. Anything else you want to talk about in terms of getting into the business? So, I guess, I mean, well, yeah. So, was Western as a company, was it doing stuff sustainably when you took over the company or when you got involved in the company, or was that something that you've put your stamp on, or a bit of both? Because I mean, I've spoken to Matt from Wonder Alpine on the podcast. And I guess when I mean, I've bought 2 sets of skis in my entire life. So my Volcals are, I'm trying to move my finger the right way. They're like 20 years old, and my Augments I got last season. You don't really stop and think about the environmental impact of a set of skis or a snowboard because yeah, it's not a very frequent purchase. But when you do kind of unpack it and you go, actually, there's quite a lot of plastic in these, and there's quite a lot of petrochemicals, and then depending what wax you're putting on the bottom of the ski or board, that might be a petrochemical product. So you kind of go, well, hang on, this doesn't really vibe with the idea of going down this beautiful, pristine white snow and preserving the planet. So yeah, so
right.
Did Western have like a beating heart of sustainability and impact, or was that the Leo stamp? Did you bring that, or did you amplify it?
Yes, it did, but it was in a very different way. And I'm a little bit like cautious when I say this because I'm not trying to throw shade on the founder in the way that he brought it up. Okay. But he was like, when it in his bio, like when it was like on the website, it was like Jesus and powder. Those were his two things. For a while, he was trying to, I think people in the States might kind of understand what that means, but to just hit it on the nail, it's like kind of like a very conservative mindset. He was very like wanting to make boards in the U.S., right? Kind of that, and the U.S. in terms of OEM. It's like, all the OEM manufacturers, except for like the promo board companies that like make, for anybody and anybody, are, they have their own brands. And so he was never really able to secure a good OEM. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of really good boards made in the States. But he eventually went over to a factory called GP87 in China. And when I took over the company, I was like, to be totally honest, Barry, I was like, if you didn't do that, I wouldn't have taken over the company. And it's not to say that I'm not all about like local in manufacturing. Like, put the politics aside. Like, let's just face it. Like, before Weston, I was a Venture loyalist and I was an Eversummer loyalist, and that's because they were Colorado companies. But the thing is like, for me, I wanted to grow Weston big, and it's really difficult to do that if your factories are not really, really committed to OEM. And it was a great, opportunity. But so like his values, if you will, were different than mine, if you will. But I want to make like something like kind of like almost perfectly clear. Like, oftentimes, especially in this very divisive kind of world where people want to put things into a category, right? Like, one of the things that like, for us, right? Because I had experienced kind of like, that gatekeeping aspect, this kind of like, the fraternal order of snowboarding, of backcountry riding, like you need to get hazed and you need to freaking get your ass kicked and have half your friends die in avalanches. And just because I didn't want to prescribe to that, and I was like, no, I would rather put out a handshake than point a finger and be like, you are not like this, you don't belong here. I'd rather be like, you belong here, let me help you along your way, right? And nowadays, like people would call that like DEI, right? Diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I'm just like, dude, Weston's been doing this stuff since long before it became like a political buzzword, right? And I actually remember once Weston, somebody in our comments was like, oh, Weston, like they're hella woke. This is before woke became like a bad word. And
Mm.
I was like, woke? It's like, what's this mean? I was like, I don't even understand like what woke means. And I had to like look it up. I literally Googled woke because I was like, is that did we just get, is that a bad review?
Yeah,
Is that a
is this
bad?
good or bad? Yeah.
Yeah. And so I was kind of like, huh, it's kind of interesting. But now, like, with when I think about like social responsibility, when I think about like green energy and stuff like that, well, the industries that I kind of came from, if there was always this kind of like political aspect of it. It was like, oh, okay, like, this, if you're green, that means you're some fucking, you're some patchouli smelling hippie that like, wants to save the planet, right? And it's like, and if you're, for oil, you're this like businessman that like, don't like, I'm going to tear
Yeah.
apart the earth. And
Just
it's like,
more
well,
money. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Well, I'll get to that interesting point right there. But like, when I got into the industry, it was neither, right? It was just people who wanted to make energy, right? And it was kind of like, okay, there is this nice kind of like sustainable aspect about it, but the people that have been in renewable energies long enough know that at the end of the day, that output is the exact same output as burning coal. It's energy. That's the utilitarian piece. The brand just happened to be, renewable energy. But at the end of the day, it was the utilitarian piece, which I found extremely, extremely interesting because it got manipulated to like all sorts of different things. And when people got almost too into this idea of like, hey, like we're trying to like, save the world, it's like, don't forget, you still are selling energy. Like, and it was very important that like you kind of don't forget that. But anyways, back to this kind of like, politicization of, something that probably shouldn't be politicized, like B Corp is actually a perfect example, I think, of something that should be completely bipartisan.
Mm.
It should not be looked at as the badge of a woke company that's trying to do like, socially responsible things and
Mm.
promote DEI. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, okay, and I think that there's a lot of problems when people start to take it too far. Okay. And so like, I'm just gonna kind of leave it at that. Like
Mm.
there's, there's the pendulum is swinging in all sorts of different directions when it
Mm.
comes to these DEI initiatives that like, to be totally honest, as a person, I might not necessarily agree with.
Mm.
Okay. But when it comes to just like, what do I hope like in terms of the backcountry community? It's not like I hope vote this way and you must allow like all of these like hyper liberal causes. No, when it comes to backcountry
Mm.
riding, all I'm saying is don't be a dick. All right. And realize that you can do good and do more good than you do harm. Like
Yep.
give back like to what
Mm.
gives you, right? That's something that I'm just kind of like, that's not a political message, right?
Yep.
For, I was just, it's kind of like having the freedom to be able to pursue your own happiness. That's the ultimate American ideal. That's
Mm.
like the core of like, so like the second you take that out, that's what we're trying to get to pursue is just let people to enjoy the mountains in a way that has been meaningful and spiritual to us and allow for everybody to do
Mm.
that. And it's kind of like, okay, like when you set that all aside, like people get it. And like, and that's what been my like kind of biggest fears, if you will, of just being, labeled as
Yep.
like pigeonholed into this particular thing. And it's like, you know what? Like, did you not know Weston's roots? You
Mm.
know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, we came from very conservative like values,
Yeah.
and but the thing is for those exact same purposes, I still talk to Barry. We still vibe, it's like, dude, at
Mm.
the end of the day, it's snowboarding. The snow doesn't care which way you voted,
Yeah,
you know?
what color you are or what ethnicity you are. It's like, yeah,
Exactly. That high five, like,
yeah.
it doesn't matter, right? One of my best, one of my snowmobiling buddies, he's like, we are like politically opposite sides of the spectrum, but because we connect on
Mm.
the snow, because, we share those high fives, we share that powder, it almost breaks down like all of that,
Mm.
and that's what we need more of, right? We need more togetherness and less decisiveness, and yeah, like, and I really hope that like people see, and I think we are starting to see like a shift in terms of like, what does it mean to be like a socially responsible company, right? It's not just about this like, oh, fuzzy like this or whatever. It's like, oh, people, planet, profits, and processes that support this or whatever. It's no, it's like, no, you're just committed to running a better company.
Mm.
Like, that's really like the basis of what I can say. And honestly, when you mentioned like, oh, the CEO changes and like all of a sudden they don't like renew, right? I'm kind of like, okay, like, then was there truly that shift? Was there really that alignment? And it goes back to that kind of like I'm sure you've heard the term greenwashing in the
Yep.
renewable industry, right? And I think we see it not just in renewables, you see it everywhere, right? Somebody does, puts on a plastic sticker, made with 100% wind energy. I'm
Yeah, yeah,
like, there's something fishy about that,
yeah. Well, I mean, when I was in
Like,
the
it's
medical world, a lot of the companies would get their products manufactured in China, but I think it's something that there's a percentage level. You probably know there's a percentage amount of stuff that you can do to a product, and in some cases, it was just putting the product into the box, which would then be you would then be eligible to say made in Germany. So these Swiss American or Euro American global companies were manufacturing the product in China, all and similar to what you say, like all in the same factory as pretty much everyone else. They then get shipped to Europe. They have one small boxing plant in Switzerland, and then they get to say made in Switzerland on it. And it's like, no, it's been manufactured in China. It's been boxed in Switzerland with precision. Yeah. But I think I think you've touched on quite a few things there, which I 100% agree with. I think I, I, I think there is risk of B Corp being politicized because I think a lot of people would think that it is more a left leaning concept that you should do good and give back. Whereas I guess in general, the more conservative right leaning is no, you look after yourself. It's down to you to do what you can do to better yourself and pull yourself up and get to a better position in life. But I think I'm very much of the same opinion that it shouldn't matter. I think B Corp can provide that middle ground of like you say, just don't be a dick. Like just be a good business that treats people with respect and dignity. And I love your comment of don't point the finger, reach the hand, put the hand out for a handshake, don't point the finger. It's like we are a tribal social species who relies on each other. We need each other, and if we work together, we will do better rather than and doing stuff by skiing by yourself is boring. So working by yourself is boring. Like work with other people, have some fun, like share, help, give back. It's like yeah.
Yeah, totally. And the thing that I feel that in renewable energies that ultimately saw the breaking down of the barrier was when the money came involved. And when all of a sudden you put aside all of these kind of like these these differences in terms of ideology and whatever, and you just, at the end of the day, it had a place. Solar had a place. Large scale solar, distributed solar had its place. Wind had its place. Nuclear has its place. Natural gas, oil, all of it has its place. And all it had to do was kind of harmonize, right? And once the people like kind of was like, okay, like listen, what we're ultimately getting at here is not about, not just about like climate change. It's not just about, domestic oil and preserving production and keeping prices down, right? It was about just having a better energy supply, right? And the second they realized that, and it was like, hey, this is better for everybody, right?
Mm.
This is better for, the security. You get the benefits of everything. The finance people, this is financeable. This is everybody's able to make money off of it. Was and that's where like down at the heart, like I am a capitalist. Okay, I do believe that like the profit incentive is what keeps, businesses to improve. And I would be lying to say if like I came at Weston for altruistic reasons, in because I'm born and raised in America. I'm an entrepreneur,
Land of the
there
free,
like
home of the brave. God damn it. Let's
that's
go.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. But one of the things you asked before about like my family, there was actually something that my dad would usually say. He was like, you can do good by doing well. And because he has, and then the reason that he said that, I maybe it was just some psychological mind game to like get me more into entrepreneurship and not, go into the nonprofit world or something like that. But he pointed to a lot of his kind of the people that he looked up to. He was a scientist turned entrepreneur. And he would oftentimes look at the Gates Foundation. He would look at the Waltons, and he would look at these very successful people and measurably impact the amount of impact that the Gates Foundation has had on the world versus, you know, almost all nonprofit. Like the guy practically like wiped out polio from Africa, was it? It was something crazy like that.
I
Like,
think, yeah, malaria has been the big thing. I think they've been, yeah, I can't remember exactly. Yeah.
yeah, it was something crazy like that. And so it was like, that was kind of something that I found that, kind of ties a lot of it together, even when it came to the
Mm.
renewables. Because like, at the solar company I was with, we had to, bring on investors. They were very, they had one track, how am I going to make a return on my investment here? We did bring on even an oil and gas company. They were one of our best investors that help us to work out all of the technology, so on and so forth. And it was like, when we, set aside these kind of like differences, like we're all at the end of the day, like when it comes to snowboarding and skiing, we're all out there to enjoy the same thing. And so it's kind of like, and I think that in every different space, like a similar story can be kind of said, and it
Mm.
just, and I hope that people will more so look at B Corp as just like, hey, this is just the right way to do business. This isn't just it's like don't just, it's like don't forget about all of these other factors that we really, really should be considering, right? Supply chain, when, our HR policies, how are we building businesses that truly, truly take into account all of our stakeholders, and every, finger of our operation, in terms
Mm.
of all the different, how we're spread out. And it's kind of like, to like, I think a good analogy too is the manufacturing piece, right? Because like you can no really not say that anything is made in blank anymore unless you're a fully of service company and a 100% service company, like no equipment, nothing, right? 100% service. Like, can you say I am a fully, insert country made in the
Mm.
USA,
Yep.
right? Everything else is a total farce. It is the greenwash. It's
Yep.
it's the nationalist wash to make people feel all bright and rosy that like, oh, like I'm supporting like American jobs or whatever, right? Because like you peel back that onion one thin layer, and it's just like, oh, that material, most of the stuff, like, oh, this was made, all of this cotton came from, Vietnam. Oh,
Mm.
and so it was, designed in America? Oh, well, the person that designed it actually Indian, on a J2, on like an immigrant visa, and it's just like, okay, like, it doesn't take very long to realize we're already committed to like being a global company, and
Mm.
that anything else is just like I said, it's just marketing, right? And with B Corp, you're looking at every operation of your company. It's not just something. I've told people this when people ask, like, oh, what is B Corp? I'm like, okay, it's not like, here's here's some money for a self-certified thing, and
Mm.
I get to tag the sticker on that says we're doing good. So I was like, no, it's a full-on like rectal exam. Like, they're gonna look at everything. They're gonna look at places that you did not feel comfortable sharing,
That
and
is the best
all of a
description
sudden,
ever.
and I was like, and it everything comes out, and it's just like, but the thing is when you look at every single piece, you're thinking about everything that I might not have even thought about, right? Me even coming into this, like feeling like, hey, I have some sense of like social responsibility, learned so much about like, you're right. Do I have a process for, auditing my suppliers? Do I have a process for, evaluating whether or not like my compensation is, on averages or whatever. It's like it at the end of the day, these are things that I think every company should be doing, right? So, and if at the end of the day, why not make yourself accountable for it?
Mm.
And if you can commit yourself to just doing the right thing, then and that goes back to like that there's no reason that you can't do well. And
Yeah.
so it's like, if people see B Corp and see it as like, here's a company that's committed to doing well, it's almost like all the negative things that when people think of the big corporations and this and
Mhm.
this, and oh, well, they screw over the little people and they just take advantage of all this stuff, right? It's kind of like, all right, look, like, you know, push that hype, push all that, rhetoric aside.
Mm.
And like, I'm firmly believe that like more companies should be, and they're probably doing more of the stuff and because I am one to believe, and maybe I'm naive to think this, that people are inherently good. And businesses as an extension, as just a group of people, that means that businesses are inherently good, right? And it's just, ethics and bad decisions that bring businesses down, right? And so it's kind of like, that's kind of where and it just holds you accountable, right?
Mm.
Just like, and everybody doesn't hurt to be held accountable, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
No, I mean, I totally agree. I think um because we had a bit of a Zoom call a couple of months ago when we were scheduling this Zoom call. Remember, we were talking about, impact and doing good, and I think that it I just keep coming back to like doing good is not always black and white. There is a bunch of gray in the middle. Like you saw, sure, yes, there might be some benefits to supporting local manufacturing, but then actually if the manufacturing is not that great and it's actually not being manufactured locally, then actually what is the impact you're making? And I'm a firm believer in that, do good by doing well. But I think where I would challenge some of those bigger foundations and maybe like the Waltons would be like, well, could they have done more on the journey to share the wealth on the journey? I mean, I don't know enough about the Waltons per se, but you look at Microsoft and kind of go, he walked away with like multi billions. Well, was everyone paid well at Microsoft? Like, were the cleaners all paid well in their buildings? What was their supply chain like? I mean, we all know what the Apple supply chain's like. It's not great. We see people jumping off so clearly you kind of go, as a company, okay, then, and I would imagine Apple is paying some sort of charitable donations at some point. But for me, it's like, do good by doing well, but do good like across the board. So not just you do the good, but have the business do the good on the journey, so that you're kind of, the giving is happening while you're doing it, rather than kind of get to the end and go, oh well, I ran a really good business, now I've got a ton of money, I'm now just going to try and give it away. I mean, Tony, if you're listening, Tony Glover from Kinloch Wilderness Retreat, shout out to you. I keep coming back to my medieval history degree. And back in the day, the king or the lord or the barons, they would be complete assholes for all of their life, and then just before they died, they'd go on pilgrimage to the Holy Land, they'd go on crusade, and then they'd come back and go, well, I've done my good deed, so all my sins are now absolved. And it kind of feels like sometimes that's how big business does operate. It's like, well, yeah, we've not been the best corporate citizen. We didn't really pay anyone a living wage, or even a minimum wage. But hey, we've made a big donation to charity, so you can't really hate on us completely. So I think, yeah, doing the good on the journey, which clearly what you're doing, and I think the other thing that you sort of touched on was, yeah, I've had one client who I was taking through the B Corp journey, and we got to some of the questions around diversity, and he literally said, "This shit's too woke. I think I'm done with B Corp. We're stopping here. I don't want to go any further." And I think, again, what you sort of touched on it, like some companies that make a stand or a stance on some things, it's like you may be getting out in front of your skis here, pun intended. And for me, it's about make the impact with your business that's relevant to the business and the industry that you're in. So for you, community building, getting more people into backcountry skiing, like, yeah, take a stance on that. But I think it's when companies start taking a stance on, I don't know, I won't name anything too, I don't know, like you could pick some social justice topic and go, Western Backcountry is now just going to donate somebody to this cause that's actually not really related to skiing or backcountry or the outdoors. But Leo and the team are just like personally passionate about it. But we don't affect any change on that as a company. And I think that's again where it kind of gets murky and people disconnect from that. And that's when it does get politicized. Whereas actually just trying to solve a problem through the business that's relevant to the business with purpose, with meaning, doing it in a way that's considerate of people, planet, your stakeholders, your supply chain, like that's not too much to ask for. But again, the businesses like yours that are doing it, you can see it.
You want to hit on one of the, honestly, like, one of the hottest topics of the time is like, LGBTQ, and something we're launching a mission series, to promote LGBTQ participation in nature because of mental health. It's like the stats behind mental health within that community is extremely, extremely dismal, right? And it's kind of like, okay, like, our own experience with it, we actually had somebody, we were working very closely with somebody that came out as trans and just really had the community just shunned, just completely shunned. The whole like, trans athletes, like, oh, the whole like you're trying to turn a tomboy into a boy, like all these different things like just kind of came out. There's just all nastiness, right? And it's all this kind of like, to me, it's kind of like the noise. That's like the MAGA noise, the Made in America, at the core of the issue, it's just here is a group that has historically, had, mental health issues. Nature can help get them out in nature, get them to feel safe in a space. Like, what the hell is wrong with that? We're not trying to like be like, take a stance on whatever the heck was going on in the Olympics about the boxing. And it's like, no, we're not trying. We're just trying to create the change in this very specific space that we are operating in. I know we're going to get a lot of heat for it. I know the second that it drops, but I'm kind of like, you know what? You don't get it then. It's just like what we're trying to do. It's, people could say the same thing about our scholarships. And every time we launch a scholarship to get more women involved in guiding, for example, we'd get some dude that writes us and is like, why don't I get a scholarship? And it's just like, okay, because you're not an underrepresented group. Like, did you miss this part of like, and we're just kind of like, sorry, not sorry. It's kind of like, we're going to continue to do what we felt was like what we wanted to see. And I'm not going to try to sit there and be like, well, did you know that like, one in four backcountry riders is women, whereas like, it's a 50-50 split when it comes to resort riding. It's like, I don't got time for this shit. Like if you came at us at a point of like, entitlement that I deserve that scholarship because I'm a dude and that woman, I'm like, no need. I don't need to. You've made up your mind. Like I'm not going to convince this person's mind
Mm.
otherwise, right? And so it's kind of like, at the end of the day, like, like like I said, we're at the end of the day, we're all out there just trying to have fun in the snow, right? And that is the universal piece. And if we can start to remember, we're all trying to make a better life for ourselves. We're all trying to make a better life for our family. If we can remember that every person in this world has that similar mindset, then we've already assumed that we all have more in common than we have differently. And it's
Mm.
just, why do we focus on the differences? And
Yeah.
that's why I'm kind of like, you know what? So what if we create like create a board that gives back to, helping this group of people that, like I said, historically don't feel represented in the outdoor space. It just so we can give them, so we can try to just hold out that hand instead of pointing that finger.
Mm.
Like if they don't get that, then they're probably the ones that are pointing the finger,
Mm.
And so I'm kind of just like, okay, like, for me, I'm not trying to bring politics into snowboarding. I'm just trying to do the next right thing. And so, that's the way I kind of look at it. It's
Yeah.
like, and invariably though, like I'm not naive to the fact that, just as you are not naive to the fact that B Corp has this kind of inclination of, left leaning. I'm very aware that like by trying to be a welcoming, by trying to not be a dick, like, and I am inherently trying to promote more inclusion, that thus we get labeled. And I just encourage people to say, you know what, like,
Mm.
how
Label.
many
I mean,
high fives
yeah.
have
Labels,
him?
I guess, are in some ways half the problem, aren't they? Because it's like just it just comes back to don't. I think yeah, the overarching themes are like just don't be a dick, and yeah, reach, put the hand out for a handshake, don't point the finger. It's like if everyone just kind of lived by those principles, we'd be in a pretty good place. So maybe it's Leo for president. Maybe you could be a last minute run for presidential candidate. We won't get into that debate because that will just be a
Although
whole.
I'm sure the same dude that wrote me the nasty gram about the the women's scholarship, will have something to say. Oh, that I don't like that terminology, dick. Like you're
Yeah,
implying that
yeah, yeah.
men are mean and assholes.
Oh, dear me. Humans, eh? If we're an interesting bunch. I do sometimes wonder how we've actually survived this long on the planet without just killing each other. I mean, some days it's actually amazing that there's actually the population is actually still growing. Um, so
Inherent.
just conscious of time. So how did you discover B Corp? Like, what was do you remember the moment when you were like, was it, I mean, was it one moment? Did you see another brand, or was it simmering away in the background, and then one day you're like, hey, I think we should be a B Corp?
Um, I'm trying to think of how that came up. It was a it was a slow process. I think one of our sustain. Yeah, I think I remember. So okay, it was an intern that we had. He actually started as an event ambassador, or no, he was an intern first, then an event ambassador. Then he worked for us in doing events, and then started doing production for us. And then he has since become a B Corp consultant for a major consulting firm. And so he was the one that really championed the whole thing. And, admittedly, when I first looked at it, I was like, whoa, this is daunting.
Mm.
I was like, I did the whole checklist thing. I think I got through maybe three sections and just felt like we weren't ready, and this was actually when he was still an intern or an event ambassador. He wasn't working for us. And then when he got on, he was like, hey guys, like really just try it out. And just, he was like, I think the point of it is not to like be like, you're missing this, you're missing that, you're missing this, you're missing that. It's more just like, set the baseline of where you're at. And so if anybody is out there listening, considering it, don't get daunted by that initial survey. It's just like, look, the point of it is to make improvements. The point of it, part of the process, is understanding like how much of your organization truly has impact on things that are possibly beyond, bigger than the organization, bigger than yourself. And it was originally daunting, and then with a little bit of kind of nudging along and saying, hey, let me take this project on, I'll run with that, I don't think it's going to be super difficult. And then once we dipped our feet dipped our feet in the water, we were kind of just all in. And the more we learned about it, and after people explained to us like, hey, this isn't about getting perfect scores, it's about making improvements, then we were pretty much, we're in. We're like, you know what? And I think maybe a part of it too is just at the time, family stuff was kind of on our minds in terms of like, and then once we start thinking about that, it is about like legacy. It was about like, I would hate for this, if something were to happen to me, or if it passes on and it just goes into somebody who has maybe a different thought, I'd rather ingrain it into the DNA, and it can't just be a sticker that somebody peels off and says, no, I don't want to do that anymore. And I think like really like unless it was like stripped down to its bones, you couldn't take it out of it. And that goes back to the authenticity piece. That goes back to that integrity piece. It's just like, look, if at the end of the day, like if it is just for the likes, then it's not necessarily something that's gonna do well. Right? It's got to be something that
it's pretty obvious. Yeah, it's 100%. It's got to be baked in. And I think you've summed up the experience for a lot of people. It's like they're scared. I think most often the people that I end up helping with their B Corp is either they've had a look at it and they go, this is just too much. I don't know where to start, which is reasonable. Or I think there's quite a lot of people who maybe look at a Western or they look at like a Patagonia and they go, oh my word, like there's no, we're not that good. So we're not going to meet the benchmark. So we're not even going to bother. So I think there's an element of imposter syndrome, which stops people. And I think there's an element of we've looked at it and we just don't really, it just looks overwhelming when we don't understand what we're doing. And that's why there's people like me who can help you, who can help with the overwhelm. And actually, one client, Genora, who are a skincare company based here in Christchurch, where I live, they had to go by themselves, and they were initially, I think, at about 60 points, and they were just like, we're just not good enough. We're not ready to be a B Corp. But then I gave them some help, and I think they certified at like 110 or 115, and they were shocked that they were such a good company. And it's like, well, yeah, but you're doing the stuff that makes you a good company. You just hadn't, you hadn't put the right answers in the right boxes, and you hadn't interpreted stuff. So, yeah, it's I like to call it rigorous but achievable. Like if you're doing some good in your business, you'd probably be surprised how close you are to maybe being a B Corp. I think some people think it's like this, like holy grail, like only the best of the best. And it's like, I mean, there are some really good businesses, but if you want to get it done, you've got the mindset and the intent that you want to do it, then you can get it done.
Yeah, absolutely.
And any like big learnings or surprises from the B Corp journey?
From the B Corp journey. That's a good question. I think I don't want to say it was a surprise, if you will, but it was more just kind of like the importance of like documentation, if you will, in terms of like kind of like being very clear and communicative. And it's like, and I think that process was super, super helpful because it did require us to kind of spend a little bit of time in terms of just saying, all right, like lay out, say what you're already doing. And it's, sometimes when people think of like SOPs and like stuff like they think of like some gigantic like phone book with like process flow charts and stuff like it's like no, just some bullet points and some guidelines about how this is supposed to be done, right? And like what are some of the best practices? And it's like it's a natural part of business that somebody has to learn from somebody else. The number of times, I guarantee you, every entrepreneur has had this moment of like, huh, like I wish that was more better documented, because like I could have, now it'd be so much easier to explain to somebody else what this process is. And I think that there was a lot of that was like, huh, like okay, we're doing this already, but you know but we just didn't have that documentation. And just to be able to put it down and have a better employee handbook, a better supply chain procedure, like it just improves the business by the nth degree. And yeah, it requires us to go back to it and revise it as things kind of change and adapt to. But I think another big thing that kind of jumped out at me too was like, I think people may look at B Corp as this almost like existential kind of like, like you said, this halo, right?
Mm.
That is just like, oh, okay, like, this is for like the elite that are doing things like, and I'm kind of like, hmm, like after we went through it, I kind of was like, you know what? I do understand how this can be applied at, this is not like, you don't have to have a company that is committed to like, community and education and sustainability like Weston is, right? You don't have to, you can, a lot of organization, all you have to do is just be committed to, running a better business. And I can't think of a single business that isn't committed to doing better, right?
Yeah,
So
100%. I mean, that's why I call my B Corp coaching program Be Better. It's like use the B Corp framework to be a better business, and not just socially, environmentally, financially, metaphysically, like all round, you will just have a better business. And
right.
I think yeah, a lot of people, the documentation piece is the big missing piece for a lot of people. It's like, well, yeah, we do it. Okay, I mean, again, I'll pick on. I feel like I'm picking on Janora, but they were a classic one. So we have their whole entire company go through the B Corp process with me. So normally it's like the CEO, founder, and a handful of like people from across the team who represent. But they have the whole company, about 20 odd people, and we were going through the workers section, and it was something. Do you offer opportunities around flexible working hours and job sharing and parts. Well, I think it's workers can start time on their own schedule type thing. And Monique, the CEO, is like, I know, we totally do that. And everyone else in the company said, do we? Since when? And she's like, oh, have I not told you that? Because like in my head, I just always felt that you could come and go whatever hours you wanted as long as the work's being done. And they're like, well, no, like no one's ever told us that. And so it was just one of those classic examples where in the CEO's head it was a thing, but she hadn't told everyone. So actually getting it documented now in a relatively fast growing company, it's like, well, that's probably not a bad idea, just so that new employees know that actually I don't have to be here at 8 o'clock every morning. I can maybe come in at 10 o'clock and work a bit later, or I can work from home. So yeah, there's quite often lots of little things like that are lost in the the beginnings of the company, or the CEO or the senior leadership just think that everyone knows, but actually you put it down on paper and it's a thing.
Yeah, yeah,
And so,
indeed.
what does being a B Corp mean to you? And I guess what has it given the business? So two questions. What does it mean for you personally, and what did you feel it's given the business?
I mean, my knee jerk thought to that is just longevity. It is that kind of that commitment to it. It is like it is, putting it is coding it into the DNA that we want to commit ourselves to these type of practices. And that's really what was the key piece. I mean, I would love to say that you know I mean, I don't know. It's to be determined. I mean, I think this only happened, we only got it. I mean, it's one of these things. I feel like it's been forever because we've been working on it for so long, but I think we've only been awarded it since like last season or so. But just kind of yeah, like just I hope that, to almost bring it back to the original, like, people voting with their dollars. I hope that people see value in companies that are committed to it. Because like it's kind of saying that, like, the company behind this B Corp is, we're is not the whatever, freaking nasty corporation that just wants
It's,
to
I,
to
I,
to
I,
get.
I call them Big Evil Bastards Inc. Because it's like,
Yeah,
like in the Roadrunner cartoons, sort of like Acme Inc. It's like BIB, sorry,
yeah,
BEB, Big Evil Bastards Inc. It's like, we will just absolutely rape and pillage and take your money and treat you like shit. Like
yeah.
that's what I imagine is um
Exactly. Unfortunately, like I said, there are companies out there that are like that, even though I'd like to think most companies out there are not.
yeah,
Like, and I think that that's just, if it helps people, at the end of the day, like I said, our board, is it really? I
yeah.
mean, obviously I'm committed to say, and I do truly believe we make an awesome product. We'll stand
Mhm.
behind it, but at the end of the day, it's a snowboard. It's a
Yep.
it's a purveyor of Stoke, and I understand that everybody has different choices and different options and are motivated by different things. And if people are out there that want to, like I said, it's that not believe in the sense of like, oh, that has the same politics as me, but just
Mm.
believe in, like, in that the enjoyment and that are of out there riding POW, of the high fives, of being out there with their buddies. If people, if people want to support that, then and that's what we're about, then I hope people, vote with their dollars in terms of what they want to see more of. And that's where, like, I really think that it's not just about us. I think at the end of the day, when you do, because I'm, for lack of better words, grow good. To your t-shirt, when you do grow good, and the impetus on grow is, I think others will take notice.
Mhm.
And I think, and as other companies like try to get into it and say, hey, you know what, maybe we should be, you know, consider our supply chain more, or do this with our staff more, and it'll create a better
Mm.
working environment, or whatever it is, right? Then it just helps bring the bar up for everybody. And it's just like, because then, it's that natural thing of competition. It's just like, all
Mm.
right, well, how do
It
you get
becomes
better? How
the
do
new
you,
normal, and I think that's what that's what I feel like. I mean, I've been doing this B Corp stuff for like pretty much a decade now, and
wow.
10 years ago, even 7 years ago, even 6 to 5 years ago, people were kind of like, I don't really know what you're talking about. Like, this all just sounds a bit woo woo, and like I just don't like, why, what is it, like, why would I need to do it? Whereas now the conversation with like 5 years ago, I was knocking on doors like, hey, I think you should be a B Corp because what I see of your company, like you're behaving like a B Corp. Can we have a conversation? And some people were kind of like, yeah, no, like, never heard of it, not interested. Others like, yeah, completely misread it and they weren't actually doing that much good. Whereas now, most I do quite a lot of talking and workshops. And at the beginning, I'll say, hands up, who's heard of B Corp? And now you're probably getting 90% of the room put their hands up. A few years
Mm,
ago, you'd maybe have one person in the room. So now
mm,
I'm even asking, okay, who buys some stuff from a B Corp? Like, who's got a B Corp in their pantry, or like who's wearing B Corp? And maybe, I don't know, half the room keeping their hands up. And so now I go, okay, well, does anyone work for a B Corp? And so now you're getting two or three hands going, yeah, I work for one in a room. And it's like, okay, well, so where are you from? Like, who are you? So, like, it definitely feels like it is, we're still, I keep saying it, like every episode, people are going to be sick to death of me saying this stuff, but, we're still only at 8,000, almost 9,000 B Corps, which is still only about 0.01% of the global business community is currently based. We're not even at 1% threshold yet. So it is still super, super niche, but it does just feel that the general trend is that more and more business owners, more and more companies are like, actually, do you know what? Maybe we should. Are we being a dick? Because it turns out some people are being a dick in business, and I think more and more people are just going. I've mentioned it before. There's a couple of UK comedians whose names escape me now, but they do this sketch where they're both dressed as like Nazi soldiers, and they're having a conversation, and one turns to the other and goes, "Hang on a minute, are we the baddies?" And because it's like, they've got the skull and crossbones on their head. It's like, oh, we're the baddies. And it's like, I think more and more businesses are having that moment of, oh, actually, us pouring that toxic waste in the local river, that's not cool. Oh, we didn't. Okay, we kind of get it now. So, yeah, I think that's why there's a general trend of more and more people looking at this, because it makes business sense, it makes financial sense, and you get to go home and sleep at night knowing that you've grown some good, and you can't put a price on that. So
You're here. You're here.
so just finishing up then, in terms of the impact that you're making, um, obviously, and just having a look on your website before joining the call, like it's really cool. Like you log all your supply chain on your website so people can see where you're getting your stuff from. So hashtag transparency. But in terms of yeah, the kind of like the good that you're doing through the business, do you want to just like, because obviously the product has got some special characteristics, but just give us an overview of where you're making the impact as a company, as a B Corp.
Where are we making the most amount of impact? It kind of comes back to the powder. It comes back to just sharing the stoke. It comes back to the mental health piece. Like, I've had my ups and downs. Like my journey in life, like with my mental health, has been tumultuous. And like I said, like for the outdoors has been my church. It's been where I've been grounded at my highs and my lows, right? And that's honestly where I really hope the impact is. And it's almost cliche to say. It's just like, we're just sharing the stoke, and that's really why that's the impact that I really hope that people have. And if I were to take that one step, slightly deeper, it's this community piece that I really hope that we're making an impact, that the backcountry experience, if you will, is for the better, and that we are helping to, with this type of mentality of that hands, let me give you a hand instead of point a finger. That type of mentality, the don't be a dick mentality, is what is allowing for split boarding, what is allowing for, backcountry skiing to be one of the fastest growing two of the fastest growing sports in, out there. Because, it needed to be. If this was a bunch of stodgy, old dudes that just were, hoarding their ski stash, on private land, or on public lands, it's like this would have gone nowhere. And I think it's just, when something is meant to be shared, like nature will find its way.
Mm.
It'll flow, and it flows where energy goes. And when it's something that people want, and that is going to provide a lot of good for people, it will get gravitated towards it. And
Mm.
and I would just like to hope that we've had some impact on what we've done with that. And that goes the same with every operation. I think we're lucky that we have that stoke, if you will, is the key benefit of our utility, of our skis and boards. I've often joked. I was like, we don't really sell skis and boards, we sell purveyors of stoke. Like, and
Nice.
that's how we kind of look at it, right? So that, ideally, I'd like to say that that's our impact. And with the B Corp stuff, to be part of this movement where hopefully people can,
Mm.
will seriously really look at voting with their dollars, and really think about, like, hey, am I truly, at every point in time, people look at this and say, am I, is my vote truly where I want to see this world for my children and my future, or just do they align with the things that I want to see in this world? Then, again, in as trying to look at things apolitically, right?
Mm.
Like in terms of just look at something for the specific value that it provides. And I think that when people do that, then all the labels can wash away, because like I said about the mountain, like the mountain doesn't care what label you came, like
Yeah.
the mountain's going to be there, and that high five, does it's the same no matter what that other person believed, right? And
Mm.
it's the same feeling that's given to both people. So I really just hope our impact is just more high fives, less division, more high fives.
Love it.
You know, share the stashes.
I think that's super cool because what I think's really cool about that is we'll make sure there's a link to your website. Like, on your website, you go deep into your environmental sustainability in terms of like the product selection. You've even got access to there's a spreadsheet where people can see your environmental metrics and tracking. But what I think is the missing piece with a lot of companies is the rational, systematic, numbers based. Like, that's easy to track. Are we using, what kind of input material are we using? What percentage of this? Da, 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 da. What's really hard to track is the impact of the high fives in the powder. And I actually think that is the more important thing, but it's immeasurable. Like, how do you measure the love that you have for your newborn daughter? You cannot. But that is the most
Right.
important thing that you have in your life. Whereas you can measure how many hours sleep you've lost, or how much meal she's eating. Like, yeah, we can measure that, but you can't measure the love that you and your wife are putting into the food preparation. You can't, and that, I think, is where the modern business world, it's like we've got the rational has been really, really baked in. It's this more, it's like, the skiing is your church. It's like, it's this spiritual, metaphysical thing that is, you cannot capture and you cannot measure. But actually, I think that's the most important part of business and humanity and life. Like, that's what separates us. And so
Right.
I actually think it's really cool that that's the thing that you've gone to, rather than like looking on, on your website. You've got all these stats about your input materials in your supply chain. It's like, that's almost like, I guess almost like that's just taken for granted that that's a good way of doing it. But it's, again, it's this bigger thing that you're focused on, and that's the core of the business that you can't imitate.
Well, I mean, that's kind of like the management piece versus the leadership piece, the how you do it and the why you do it, right?
Yeah.
And it's both absolutely important, right? You can't manage what you can't measure. And if you've got no gas in the tank, right? No amount of nothing's going to get you there. And then we all have to have gas. We all have to kind of realize the purpose behind it. And to the environmental piece, right? Like if for one, am a believer that, like, you know what? Like, the best thing that I can do for the environment is give people a reason to want to protect it. And if people really fall in love with nature, with being out there, like, they will protect it, whether it's from public lands perspective, whether it's from a climate change perspective, whatever it be. It'll get to people no matter what your beliefs are. Like, you will want to preserve and protect that land, and that's ultimately what what hopefully we do is make people
Mm.
fall in love with riding the POW and want to protect it. So, and want to see our future generations to be able to continue to do that. And it's like, again, it comes from all different angles in terms of preserving public land, in terms of, what we're doing about climate change and so on and so forth. So, yeah. But that's a whole nother podcast in and in
Mate, I
itself.
feel I
So.
feel like we need to have I feel like, yeah, we should book in for another one. But well, yeah, so let's leave it there, because you need to go and do your workout and then go and catch up with your beautiful family. I need to go and get some lunch because I've got another meeting coming up. But I just, I love doing this podcast because I'm getting to connect with so many awesome humans from all around the world. Where I think I've got a good mate of mine, Carl Davidson. Like, his whole mantra is like, just don't be a dick. And I think that, don't be a dick, and extend the hand for the handshake, don't point the finger. And stoked for the POW, share the POW. Like, such a cool metaphor that you've got for life. I have no doubt that your daughter is in very good hands. And I mean, you've got to hope that she wants to be a skier or a snowboarder when she's that's going to be okay. We'll leave that one because that could happen. Oh, awkward.
If she so chooses, I guess.
Yeah. But mate, no, look, just genuinely love your work, and hopefully we'll get to meet in person one day and go and find a nice piece of snow and have some cool times and give each other a real high five instead of a virtual high five. But yeah, just keep on doing what you're doing, man. It's
Thank
super
you.
cool.
You too. I appreciate you.
Hey, it's Tim here, that B Corp bloke from Grow Good. If you want more content on purpose, B Corp, how to do more good in the world as an individual or a business, then you know the drill. Hit the like and subscribe. Check out some of our other videos. They're probably floating around here somewhere. You know how it works. Thank you so much. See you next time.